Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our second week of the Winter Intercession Career Development Academy. Today, we are going to be talking about transferable skills. And so, to start us off, we have a session on emotional intelligence in the workplace. With us today, we have Brittany Claridge and Molly Hutchinson. And so, I will allow them to go ahead and introduce themselves.
Okay, I'll go first. Hi, everyone. My name is Molly Hutchison. I am a health educator over at the Center for Health Education and Wellbeing, which is on the Homewood campus, but is a university-wide resource. My areas of domain are emotional well-being, physical well-being, social well-being, sexual well-being. So I work with students, graduate students, undergrad students, to cultivate that well-being. I'm also a public health professional. So this is one of the reasons I was cued into this workshop today. So I will talk a little bit more about public health and that as a professional.
Great, thanks, Molly. My name is Brittany Claridge. I serve as the Director of Student Life at the Bloomberg School of Public Health. Our office serves to support students as they navigate through their time at the school, whether that is connected to students who are in a moment of crisis, students who want to develop skills further. We also serve and support student assembly, as well as the resources that they have. And I'll go over the services that my office provides towards the end of the presentation. But I hope, if nothing else, you see the Office of Student Life as a resource for you throughout your time at the school, regardless of what you should need. And I'll turn it over to Molly for now.
Thanks, Brittany. So hi, everyone. I'm very excited to talk to you all about emotional intelligence. This is a topic I don't necessarily get to talk about as much as I would like, but it is a huge factor of not only like my area of well-being, but also as someone who has recently gone into the public health force and in the workplace, and how this can really cultivate, create career development, and just being a better public health professional within communities or within work teams. So I just wanted to go over a little bit more about my office. So we are a team of some public health professionals, some social work, some higher education, and our goal really is to provide students, graduate students, and trainees resources around well-being. And so I just want to put that out there as, although I'll be kind of giving you skills today around your career, if you need help or want support as a student and graduate student, I encourage you all to reach out to me, and I'll have like my email at the end. So we're talking about emotional intelligence. I'm sure some of you have some knowledge on this, especially being in public health. So feel free to either unmute yourself, plug in the chat what emotional intelligence is. Even if you don't have a full definition, what are some pieces of it? And I hope to have you all kind of participate a little bit. So feel free to just put in your thoughts. It'll also help me kind of understand how much knowledge you have on this topic. Okay, so someone says being able to accurately read someone's emotions. Yeah. What else? Ability to read and empathize, with others, empathy, all right. Handling your emotions. Any other thoughts? Responding appropriately so you're not aggravating the situation. Yeah, being able to balance emotions. Yeah, this is great. So it sounds like you all have a good understanding of emotional intelligence, at least for definition wise. And I encourage you all to feel free to share your own experiences or knowledge around this, because I think we can learn as a community. So I put in a very basic definition here, which refers to the ability to identify and manage one's own emotions as well as the emotions of others. Very basic, but it's complex, right? There's a lot of pieces into it, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. So why do we care about emotional intelligence? Why are we here today? Why do you want to learn more about it, grow your knowledge or skills around it? You can think of it either just like working with a team or specifically in public health. Okay, I'm seeing nothing in the chat. So maybe y'all are thinking about, oh, makes us better co-workers. Yes, definitely helps us get along. Yeah, so a lot of team-oriented ideas here. Work efficiently. Yeah, so facilitate healthy negotiations. Exactly. So there's communication involved. There's that working efficiently as a team. Just kind of having that awareness of others, right, to improve us as individuals and as a group. So I pulled this from Harvard Business Review, this statistic. But emotional intelligence accounts for nearly 90% of what sets higher performers apart from others with similar technical skills and knowledge. So as students at Johns Hopkins, right, you all have a lot of knowledge, skills. You're very smart, right? And so having that emotional intelligence will help kind of get you a little bit farther than maybe your peers who don't have that skill. So that's one reason to kind of cue us in here, right? As we're thinking about career development, as you're going into the workforce, in addition to the other things you all were talking about. So you kind of talked generally like teamwork, right? Working efficiently. Anything specific around public health that is important around emotional intelligence? We work with many communities filled with trauma. Yes, yes. So that awareness, understanding, building trust. Communication is key. Yes, definitely. And as you're thinking, I would also love for you to put in the chat what area of public health you are studying and or what type of work setting you are trying to achieve after you graduate, just to see where everyone is at. As we all know, public health is a vast area, and so some of us are going to be working with communities more than others, so I would love to see the spectrum. So environmental justice, public health policy. So I'm going to be questioning you, trying to make a point. Yeah. Epidemiology, infectious diseases, health in crisis. Awesome. Any other areas of public health representing here today? Okay. So to give you a little bit more background, my area of public health is health behavior and health education. So I will say a lot of my examples will lean towards that, but I also recognize that some individuals work a lot more with data or just work more with a team of public health professionals rather than with the community. So feel free to plug in, thoughts around your area as well. So as you all kind of said, it can help us build trust with communities, especially if we're not representing that identity or experience. Having that emotional intelligence can help us navigate conversations with others, help us kind of learn about each other, and then, start to engage in that public health intervention, communication campaign, whatever it may be, survey. It also helps us work together effectively, as the pandemic, I'm sure, has been used a lot in your classes. You can see where state, local, federal departments around public health have worked together effectively and ineffectively, right? And so having that emotional intelligence can really improve that, especially when we're thinking about the pandemic, emergency management, things where we need to be working together as a team, very cohesive. It also improves our creativity. Sorry, I spelled that wrong. Creativity there. So if you're doing more health education, designing surveys, right? We need to think about the perspective of those that we're working with, and kind of pushes us and challenges us to be better public health professionals. Just some ideas here. I'm sure there's a lot more, and feel free to plug in the chat if you have things that I'm missing here. So now that we kind of have a little groundwork of where we're at, what are the domains of emotional intelligence? If you are familiar with it, or if you're going to go do research about this afterwards, you may see these domains kind of described in different ways, but they're all here. So sometimes you hear relationship management, self-management, but it's all similar. So self-awareness, self-regulation, social skills, empathy, and motivation are all key to kind of engage in that emotional intelligence and building that area. So I am going to describe all of these. I'm going to talk a little bit about it, then give you some ideas of how to build that skill. So feel free to write down things that you think, oh, maybe I haven't tried that, or this is something I would like to try, especially if you're noticing or realizing maybe you don't have as much skills around self-awareness, etc. So feel free to write notes just to kind of give you those skill building techniques there. So the first one is self-awareness. Okay, so Jonathan said this is very important in my line of work. I'm excited to learn more. Great, I'm glad. And I'm going to give you resources at the end as well. So if this seems a little bit more basic than you need, you can a little bit learn more as well. So self-awareness, like first step here of emotional intelligence, this is kind of understanding how you feel, understanding your emotions and how those affect others around you. So being self-aware when you're in a leadership position maybe also means having a clear picture of your strengths and weaknesses, and it means behaving with humility. So as you're going into the workforce, maybe it's the second time around or the first time around, right? Understanding how your feelings and emotions can impact others on your team, and how those weaknesses can also, being self-aware of your weaknesses can be a strength. So just really, right, having that understanding, cognitive behavioral therapy is really helpful. If you go see a therapist or counselor, a lot of times they're kind of helping you build this emotional intelligence if this is a gap for you. So just keeping that in mind, that these techniques can be searched for with other phrasing as well. So how can you become self-aware, right? This is a lifelong journey. And there's a lot of different ways. I'm sure some of you can see bullet points on here that you do already, but maybe you're looking to become a little bit more self-aware. One that I really encourage everyone to think about is meditation. I think it's one that some people really don't connect with self-awareness as much, especially when we're thinking about career development. But meditation is not about, clearing your mind of things, right? It's really understanding your thoughts, your emotions, and how your body kind of physically reacts to that. So we're sitting back and we're putting on our observing mind and saying, hey, like what's going on in my head on a daily basis? So this is a really easy one because you just sit there and you're practicing this skill. It can help you just understand patterns that go through your head a lot, and that can be very helpful when you're interacting in the world and maybe you're talking before you're thinking, right? So thinking that in mind. But there's a lot of other things. So constructive feedback is also great, especially with your supervisor, your team, kind of seeing from their perspective how you're working as a member, how you are in public health, etc. Keeping a journal, so just being aware of, I'm feeling this way, and identifying and acknowledging those emotions and feelings can be one step further, because everyone's on a spectrum of emotional intelligence, and part of it is, how you're raised, the family dynamic that you were part of. Maybe you were in a family that expresses more emotions than others, or maybe you're on the opposite end where you never really express your emotions as a child. And then there's also education. Did you learn something in your bachelor's? Did you learn something in your master's? And then like the other experiences around that. So just keeping that in mind, that it could be very basic to just identifying your emotions is the first step for you, or it could be a little bit more complex to meditation or working on growth mindset. So having the awareness that you need self-awareness is a great step here. And if I'm talking in circles for you all, apologies. So just a couple ideas, using positive self-talk. So reframing our thoughts is really important part. Sorry, my cat wants to be here. So just thinking about how you talk to yourself, and then identifying, hey, is this negative or is this positive? Is this a neutral thought? Having that process can increase self-awareness. Now there's self-regulation. So this is a little bit step further, right? So this focused on expressing your emotions when appropriate. Regulating and managing your emotions is key. So a couple of you have already said that at the beginning of our slideshow. So those who are skilled in self-regulation tend to be flexible and adapt well to change. They're also good at managing conflict and diffusing tense or difficult situations. This is really important if you're in a more stressful public health environment. What are some ways you can recommend to build growth mindset? Yeah, yes, I will go back there. So on the bottom here, it says work on building a growth mindset. There's various ways depending on what maybe your barrier is for this, but a lot of times it starts with just being conscious of the thoughts that go through your head, especially when you're thinking about maybe challenges. We can think about education, right? So if you're taking a difficult course, whatever it may be, what are the thought process that you have in your head? This is really difficult. My peers are doing better than me. I don't know if I'm going to pass this. I don't know if it's leaning more towards those negative phrases that I was just saying. Like that could be, hey, maybe I don't have a growth mindset here. How can I rephrase this to say, I'm working towards this goal, right? So that reframing is really important. And I can also send you all some growth mindsets, or I can send them to Brittany, resources as well. You can find a lot of information, but understanding how you frame your thoughts when they immediately come into your mind, and then saying, where is this on the spectrum? Is it leaning more towards, positive or neutral? I'm going towards this goal, even if it's a challenge, or is it, I'm never going to be good at this, right? So that is the first step to understand. And then from there, it's kind of enacting those skills of just consciously being aware of those thoughts and then enacting it. For growth, I see learning as a way to sharpen my knife so I'm able to properly do the work. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Jonathan. So yeah, definitely lots of different ways. And I encourage you to kind of reach out to resources, Brittany maybe, or me, to talk a little bit more about the growth mindset. Okay. So self-regulation, as I said, is a step further. So tips for self-regulation. This is be mindful of your thoughts and feelings, build distress tolerance skills, especially again, like if you're going into more emergency management, you're planning to work into more pandemic style teams, look at challenges as opportunities. That's kind of a growth mindset there. Practice your communication skills, recognize that you have a choice in how you respond, use cognitive reframing to change thought patterns and emotional responses, work on accepting your emotions. So once you're aware of your emotions, feelings, actions, right, then it's that self-regulation that I already talked about. How can we be mindful in a group setting and even with ourselves, right? If we're just thinking about personal development, how can we manage our emotions in a way that can be, most effective for us, not as harmful, right? And not having that stunted mindset of, I'm never going to be able to manage my anger, whatever it may be. And so having that outlook and then reaching out to resources, whether it's a therapist, a counselor, student development, Brittany, etc., to kind of help you increase those. So social skills is, I think, a key one, especially when we're talking about public health, right? Because we're thinking about relationships. Public health is very much about relationships, as you all know. So we need to build meaningful relationships, have a strong understanding of yourself and others within any type of situation. And then true emotional understanding involves more than just understanding your emotions, but those around you. So when you're talking, let's say if we were in person right now, I could be reading the room a little bit, seeing your faces. Maybe you all are bored, excited. That's the negative towards being a little virtual. Everyone's screens are off, right? I have no understanding of how you all are feeling towards this. And so that's really important. Having those skills around reading nonverbal communication, active listening, your just communication skills in general are very important to see how others are responding to you and how you're responding to others. So how do we improve social skills? If any of you are familiar with motivational interviewing, or maybe you do have more of a social work background, those type of skills are very important to, especially when we're talking to communities that maybe don't have trust around you. So having those open-ended questions, having that nonverbal body language, so not sitting all cross and having a judgmental look on your face, right? We're opening our bodies up, we're leaning in, we're showing that we want to truly listen, not to listen to talk, but listen to hear and understand that person. On a teamwork basis, icebreakers, although it can be very annoying sometimes, can be very helpful to start opening up conversations with our team members. Eye contact, right? So whether we're thinking about your coworkers or with the community, we're not on our phone, we're not distracted. We're really here we're showing in every possible way that we want to listen to that person and we want to hear from them, right? So we're building that relationship here is really important. Empathy is then the next step, right? So we're listening, and then how do we respond? So empathy is the ability to understand how others are feeling, and it's absolutely critical for emotional intelligence. It also involves your responses to people based on this information. So when you sense that someone's feeling sad or hopeless, how do you respond? And this is a question you can think right now. Like, what do you usually do when you notice a coworker, maybe a peer in your class, or if you're already working in the field? How do you respond when you're noticing those feelings? If you kind of are trying to solve the problem, right? Like, how can I solve this? That maybe you need to gain a little bit more empathy. And sometimes it's just sitting with them and saying, I understand. I think at this point, a lot of people have seen the video around empathy, Brené Brown, and how there's a difference between sympathy and empathy. And that's really important, right? We're not trying to fix the situation or find the silver lining in things. We want to really show, I'm here for you. What do you need? How can I be helpful? And especially when we're coming into a community, and that's kind of our goal, right? Is how can we be helpful, improve your health and well-being? It's important to listen and have those skills of saying, I understand, we're reflecting back to them what they're saying, and so forth. In addition, if you're not working towards a community as much, but you're on a team of public health professionals, right? Especially when we're stressed and we're dealing with prolonged hours. I'm thinking about some of my peers who are working specifically with COVID-19, right? It can be very tiring. And so having these communication skills and building it so it's just a normal reaction coming out of your mouth can be helpful to make sure that you're not having any kind of dicey relationships where stress and tension are created. So these are some ways to build empathy. Finding a friend or someone you're most comfortable with, a family member. If you find that you don't think you have that much of an empathy, or you don't really know how to communicate it, having someone that you trust and practicing these can be really helpful. And that could just be asking them how their day is, and then starting to kind of practice those, reflecting what they say back to you, right? Creating that active listening and seeing how you do and noticing if they react or respond differently, or the way the conversation navigates because you bring in these conversations. So that's my first point. If you feel that empathy is a little bit unfamiliar to you. Other things to think about is just imagining yourself in someone else's place, right? So of course we can't understand their full complex background, but just saying, how would it feel if, my superior talked to me like that, or so forth, or a person coming in the community with this identity felt talking to this person that way. So having that perspective. Also practicing loving kindness meditation to yourself, to others. If you haven't practiced it, you can find many of them online, but it's really giving you that self-compassion for yourself and knowing that you're going to make mistakes. You're not going to be perfectly empathetic all the time, and kind of practicing how can you have that compassion for others that maybe you don't have as much of a strong relationship towards, or maybe you have more of a negative relationship, and having that kind of a compassion and framework. So I recommend that as well. And then just talking to new people as well can be really helpful using this skill, because then you're not able to really assume what they're going to react to. So first step is talking with your friend, but you may already understand like how they will react to a certain way you talk, but then talking to someone new, right? This is a whole new ball game, and just seeing how that relationship goes can be really helpful. See a chat here. Thank you, Brittany, for sharing the YouTube link. And yes, Calm is free for J2 affiliates. So if you have not practiced meditation or loving kindness meditation, I would recommend it. Thank you. The last part of this, sometimes people don't include this in resources, but I think is key, is motivation. So why are you motivated to improve your emotional intelligence? We want it to come from intrinsic motivation, right? So we're not here for rewards or increasing salary. A lot of times public health people don't get paid a lot, right? We're here to improve for the better good. You know, we're trying to work with communities, work with data, whatever it may be, to kind of improve public health. So it's really important to have that perspective from emotional intelligence. We're here to become better people, co-workers, and professionals. So if you're like, I don't really know if I have intrinsic motivation around this, and that may be where you're at, especially if you're looking for a job, right? You really want to get a job, and that can be kind of an intrinsic motivation as well. So these are just some ideas. They're very generalized, so it also depends on what you're struggling with, but focusing on small measurable goals, introduce challenges to keep things interesting, set goals to help build intrinsic motivation, and work with a friend or coworker to find accountability. So just really understanding yourself, and every so often asking, why am I doing this? Why do I want to become better at emotional intelligence, or whatever topic it is? So some other things to think about. So when you're interviewing, a hiring manager may kind of show that they are looking for someone with emotional intelligence by asking you behavioral questions. If they're, tell me a situation where you handled a difficult situation, or communicated with a coworker that you had tension with. Those type of questions can show that they're looking to see how you behave in a team, how you kind of react and understand others. So as you're interviewing with hiring managers, just thinking in mind, like, how can I phrase whatever example you're going to give or have ready to go in a way that incorporates emotional intelligence components that we just talked about. And it can be as basic as saying I was aware of so-and-so's emotions, etc. Right? So it's just very simple things that can help us improve our chances of just having a better interview and so forth. Also, hiring managers may also ask the candidates references for firsthand insight. So when you're choosing your references, thinking about who probably knows you the best in that sense, in a social aspect, and who can kind of talk a little bit more about your emotional intelligence. And as someone who has been a reference for many students, just telling them, hey, can you talk about this if you get a call, right? So just letting them know that you want them to talk about your emotional intelligence if you feel pretty strong and confident about it, and so forth. Other things I just wanted to incorporate, I know we talked about trust, but when we're thinking about in a team setting, I love to just kind of introduce these things. So trust busting behaviors. These are things to kind of notice for yourself or others, right? Lying, micromanaging, insulting others behind their backs, pointing blame, not following through, disingenuous. So these are just points, right, to be alert for if you notice you're leaning into them, or if others are, to kind of, especially if you become into a leadership role, right? We want to not have this lack of trust, right? We want to reduce micromanagement in the workplace, etc. Trust building behaviors, right? Following through, honesty, transparency, being humble, paraphrasing, active listening, and respecting confidentiality are just a couple things to keep in mind, because I feel like trust is really, really important when we're talking about public health. So for some of you that maybe this is more new, or if this was a little bit more basic and you just want to learn a little bit more about your own emotional intelligence, here are some quizzes, surveys I recommend. I would say the Psychology Today, and let me just stop sharing. I'll put these in the chat for you all. So Psychology Today, theirs is one of the longer ones. It's 45 minutes and it's very thorough. So if you really truly want to kind of understand your emotional intelligence, have questions that aren't as straightforward, obviously looking for emotional intelligence, this is the one I would recommend. If you're just curious and maybe not really interested in taking 45 minutes to take emotional intelligence quiz, this one is just kind of a fun one. I won't say it's completely accurate. It takes about 5 minutes, but it gets you starting to think about emotional intelligence. And then the last one I wanted to share is from Harvard Business Review, and this one is specifically focusing on you as a leader. So I'm just thinking about what position you're going into, what you would like to learn about yourself. So I would recommend these as next steps to learn more about your emotional intelligence, and that can kind of show gaps in where you may not have as much skill, and then lean into what you need to work on. Another thing I wanted to recommend, if you're like, this was very basic, or I want to learn more about a specific area, is Coursera has a course on emotional and social intelligence from UC Davis. And so if you want to just learn more or get some more information, feel free to utilize that. And then and that's about it for me. I want to open the floor up to anyone who has questions, comments, things that I missed, or thoughts as well, before I give it to Brittany. So anything that's going on. Any information or resources others want to share as well, because I want to acknowledge that you all probably have some knowledge in this area. Someone asked, can you please talk a little bit about how to use these lessons to navigate a toxic workplace? Yes, toxic workplace. Great question. So that could be a whole presentation. But I think it comes down to, as you kind of were saying, how do we employ these to help us navigate it? I think communication is key, right? So thinking about how you're feeling. So starting at self-awareness, right? So how are you feeling in any given moment? What emotions are coming up? Anger, sadness, loneliness, isolation. Acknowledging these and providing some coping skills. So leaning into, okay, I'm noticing that I'm feeling isolated a lot in the workplace, and having some coping skills. But also, if you're noticing toxic workplace, how can I communicate to either the coworker that you're having trouble with, or if it's a bigger issue, how can I communicate to my supervisor or superior to talk about this in a way that shows that I'm not placing necessarily judgment, but I'm talking about this in a more neutral setting, can be really important. So having that self-awareness, regulating your emotions, especially if you're finding that you're getting angry, maybe you're finding you're getting short-tempered. I'm not putting blame on you necessarily, but having that regulation can be helpful, especially when you need to have that difficult conversation with a coworker or superior, or someone that maybe it's a little bit more stressful for you. Then also, I would say that if you're employing a lot of these social skills, you're trying to have active listening, you're not interrupting, you're having that open body language, and you're still having trouble, right? That's when maybe you're talking to HR and having them pull in, and maybe it's a little bit further than just emotional intelligence. It's having that trustworthy individual interact with you and kind of help you problem solve. Let's see. I'm training climate leaders resident in my community Next segment involves leadership development. Self-awareness was one aspect we were planning to discuss. Awesome. Thank you. Sometimes you know someone is provoking you to get angry. How do you handle it? That's a great question. I had a peer of mine who works in HR help me build this presentation. I wish she was here right now. And Brittany, feel free to plug in anything that you have. But if you're noticing that someone's trying to provoke you to get angry, right? So that's starting to regulate your emotions, acknowledging, hey, this person is trying to do this, right? So you're stepping out of your thinking mind and having that reactivity towards whatever the comment was, and saying, I'm observing that I'm getting angry because I'm knowing that this person is trying to provoke me, right? So that's a first step, kind of creating a wall and having that conversation with yourself. And then noting, okay, how can I either communicate with this person about the fact that they consistently provoke me, or like that communication, where is this tension coming from? And that can be a difficult conversation. That may not always happen depending on the person that's doing it. But just having that open, hey, I'm noticing, and having some framing around this, and it could be just a conversation around it. But if you're noticing that you're consistently feeling these emotions and they're coming up with this person, then maybe having those next steps of building that conversation with the coworker, talking with your supervisor, talking with HR, and figuring out more about navigating it. So emotional intelligence can get you so far, but if the person is not willing to have that difficult conversation, then maybe something else needs to be brought in. So, and Brittany, I see you are unmuted as well.
Yeah, I would say too, I think something that I've seen work effectively with students and staff and leaders alike is practicing grounding techniques, right? So I think we maybe feel pressure in these scenarios to react immediately. And like you said, those internal conversations take a little bit of time. I don't think a minute, but 10 seconds can feel like a lot when you're in the middle of a conversation, but taking a second to say, I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to think through this. I'm going to, maybe even physically stop myself and feel the ground under my feet or feel my seat under me. Notice what I'm hearing, right? Identifying sort of those five senses and maybe picking up on a couple of things, because that can take you from that purely emotional space to sort of grounding yourself in a physical space too, which can be helpful. And then I would say too, giving yourself permission to take time and space before you respond. A lot of times conversations aren't productive when people's emotions are heightened. And often when folks can take space and again, ground themselves, cool down, have more time to think through that, the reaction on both sides may be different. And so I would say if you find yourself noticing that someone is attempting to, is purposefully provoking you to get angry, you could say, I appreciate what you're sharing, or, I hear what you're saying. I'd like to take some time before I respond to that. Let's plan to catch up later, to reconnect later today, tomorrow, at a later point. I think, again, sometimes we feel pressure to handle something in the moment when maybe handling it when we're not, right there in that moment in a heated space can be really helpful.
Thanks, Brittany. Yes, definitely. I feel like, and I apologize for not saying it, but I was implying it, is definitely, I feel like, especially when it's the two questions I had around this, taking that space is important, even if you feel that you have good communication skills, because especially if you're feeling a strong emotion, right? Having that moment and bringing up the next day or a week later, it's okay to do, and having it in a setting where maybe you feel comfortable, maybe they had some strong emotions, and having that space. So I really appreciate Brittany for you saying that. Any other thoughts, questions? Anyone had any other things to add around this presentation that maybe I missed?
No, thank you. That really helped. The only thing sometimes it comes from a close friend, so you don't know how to react, because you don't want to hurt them also, you don't want to cut it also. So sometimes that becomes, if it is in a professional, okay, you can handle, but if it comes from your close friend, someone knows that this is very touchy and still they want to provoke that in spite of repeated explanation. So those things sometimes know how to handle such a situation.
Molly, I'll step in and because I have a thought, and then I'll let you respond if you have anything different too. To me, particularly, I mean, I think boundaries are important in professional settings, but I think particularly in personal settings, boundary setting can be a really important skill. And saying to a friend, a family member, hey, I recognize that you share this and this opinion about this. It's hurtful to when you share those things. I feel hurt, and I would appreciate just not talking about that anymore. So if it's particularly if it's something that's reoccurring, I think it's okay to put up a boundary and say, this is just something that I don't think is very fruitful to our relationship, and I think isn't particularly helpful for us to continue to talk about. And I think in a healthy relationship, the hope is that someone would respect that boundary. That can take practice and time, but that's a skill I've seen be successful in a space where folks just have a point, a kind of a touchy point, like you said, particularly one of disagreement or something that sort of rubs folks the wrong way, is saying, hey, this is just something I don't want to revisit, and I'd appreciate if you respect that.
Thanks, Brittany. So I would definitely say boundary setting. The other thing I would say is with emotional intelligence in general, we're not trying to please everyone. So making sure that there's a difference there. And I think that when you're in a close relationship, you may feel like you need to be pleasing or that you're always on that same level. But I think that, as Brittany was saying, or example she was giving, like having those phrasing, I hear you, I'm listening to you, and identifying and acknowledging how you're feeling is really important as well. So, and I'm not saying that these will be just spitting out your mouth during conversations. And so that is really important to have that step back. Because I know for me, I am a person that don't deal with conflict really quickly. And so I really need to process it and have those phrasing, words, sentences ready to go to talk to someone. And that's totally okay to do. How do you navigate prejudice in the various forms we know about today, especially from a coworker or supervisor? I'll hand it over to you, Brittany. I can see there's something going on.
Yeah, well, I think there's multiple ways to approach this, right? I think in a sort of institutionalized and organizational way, I would encourage folks, depending on what's happening, to utilize the resources they have, whether that's our employee or our student assistance programs. Those are free of charge, regardless of the status you hold, and can be really helpful in kind of just walking you through how to manage a situation. And those folks can kind of meet with you over the course of time. Our IDARE office focuses specifically on supporting individuals from historically marginalized communities, and focuses on equity. And so they can be a resource for kind of thinking about how to navigate this. Our Office of Institutional Equity, if you're talking about, harassment, bias, right? Those are all resources. I would say my office too. We are not confidential resources. So if you're, I'll talk about that in a minute, but we are a private resource in the sense that unless you're sharing something about physical harm or abuse that I would be required to report, we are a private resource, so we could have conversations with you to try and navigate next steps and what to do and how to maybe navigate those kinds of conflicts. I will say, if you are talking about particularly physical, sexual abuse or gender violence or discrimination, those things sometimes fall in a category of being mandatorily reported by most staff. So we do have confidential staff across the university. Elise Campbell is one that comes to mind that works on Molly's team. We have a couple of others in our JSAP is a confidential resource. And so those are people that you can share with that aren't required to report to authorities or the university, those kinds of things. So I think those are just a couple of institutional resources. I would also say though, again, emotional intelligence, thinking about that in this context is the ability to share or provide you resources and skills to be able to share how you're feeling and how someone's practices or acts are impacting you. So a lot of times when I'm thinking through these situations, I like to encourage folks to use I statements. So an example of this could be when you talk over me in a meeting, I feel disregarded. I feel frustrated. I feel unheard. So those are just some a way in which you can express how you're feeling in a way that doesn't point blame, but also makes it very apparent what the impact versus intent maybe of an action is. I would also say too, again, sometimes bringing in a mediator to those kinds of conversations can be really helpful. So if you don't feel confident or comfortable in that conversation, again, my office can be a resource in kind of helping navigate those conversations. Some of the other ones that Paul has put here in the chat, thanks so much, Paul, can be great resources in kind of helping develop a strategy. Molly, I don't know if there's anything else you'd want to add to.
I think you got it from like a university perspective. I would just say if you're not thinking about like prejudice working at a university or as a student in a workplace setting, that's I know some people have difficulties with trust with HR, but developing from the beginning, having a relationship with your HR manager is really important, because they are the ones that have those skills to either mediate the conversation, provide you resources, or be the one to talk to, especially if it's someone superior of you. And that's usually the person, right, you're supposed to have that conversation with around these issues, and you're not able to. That's when an HR manager can be helpful. Another thing is, if maybe I wish it wasn't the case, but if HR is not the most helpful individuals, right, talking to someone that you trust in a way of saying, and not just obviously, and framing in a way that's not gossiping, right, but saying, hey, I'm feeling this way, can you help me in this situation, can also be another point of help as well. So
something else I would think of too, Molly, that you just triggered me to think of is seeing if there's someone that you trust that could be an ally, right? So is there someone who can maybe holds more privilege or power in the space that you're in, whether it's a workspace or and if you're talking about in the school as a peer, who maybe can suggest new group norms, right? Or who can share things that they've observed, maybe because you've shared that with them, but maybe they're not, Molly told me to say this, but hey, I've noticed that folks aren't always being listened to in this meeting. Could we offer everyone an opportunity to speak, or could we make it a group norm that we don't speak over one another? Oftentimes, particularly in spaces where I've worked with students, I'm a person that holds more power and privilege than that student, and so I can advocate on their behalf for something that's beneficial to everyone without having to point out, right, a particular person. I think there are moments for that, and that's often a really important practice in helping someone grow and learn. But that also comes at somewhat of a risk, whether that's a professional, emotional, social risk. And I always want people to feel safe in the way that we're navigating that. So that could be in kind of finding an ally and asking them, hey, I'm really having trouble navigating this. Would you mind stepping in, in my stead to help me? Can be a great resource.
Any other lingering questions? I just wanted to plug in the chat. Actually, I might have lost it. Oh, as Brittany's talking, I was going to plug in some growth mindset resource. So I want to hand it over to Brittany.
Great, thank you. I don't have a lot to share. Molly took as an expert, took the bulk of our conversation, which I'm so grateful for. I just want to share with you a little bit about the Office of Student Life and the resources that we have, particularly as they apply to this conversation that we've had on emotional intelligence. So the mission of the Office of Student Life is to serve students of the School of Public Health by providing ongoing opportunities to develop co-curricular self-efficacy, engage with diverse options for involvement at the school, and access a wide spectrum of support. And I'm going to go into sort of the vision of our office and how we do those things, particularly related to what we've talked about today. I'll start with two that are a little less relevant to this group and to what we talked about. One of the areas of focus for us moving forward starting this May is new student onboarding. So we are working on a more comprehensive orientation and onboarding approach, actually in partnership with the career services team here. So that's something that future students coming in will have the opportunity to see, and I'm always encouraging others to share feedback about how we can strengthen that experience as you have it. Another area of focus of ours, which actually has come up a little bit in the chat here, is student support. So we are a support resource for students in crisis, whether that is through coaching as students self-identify themselves, or whether that's through referral, which would be sort of a department or an office or a staff member saying, hey, raising their hand saying, hey, I'm worried about this student. Could you work to support them? We do support students who are navigating COVID-19 isolation and quarantine, and then also encouraging or educating the community, whether that's faculty and staff or other students, on resources that are available to students. The two opportunities or two sort of areas of focus that I think relate most to the topic we've talked about today are these next two, which would be student assembly and clubs and organizations. And then I'll move to the next one next. The reason that I think that this opportunity is so relevant to emotional intelligence is because involvement at the school is really a space to practice these skills, right? So how are you working with someone else to organize a educational initiative or a canned food drive at the school? How are you working with a difficult community partner who's frustrated at the university's engagement, right? All of these opportunities for involvement are spaces for you to practice and build self-efficacy in these areas of emotional intelligence that we've talked about. And they provide you space to practice those social skills and then get feedback, right, while you're still here at the school. So I'd encourage you, if you haven't explored the opportunities for involvement already, Student Assembly has a lengthy list on their website. Our Hopkins Groups platform is also a space where you can explore a little bit more in depth about each of the organizations and find contact information for them. And then finally, our last area of focus is developing and supporting a robust student experience. So we focus on, again, in partnership with career services and other offices across the university and school, on creating meaningful touch points for students throughout their entire time here. We do offer one-on-one coaching, which I think is really important in sort of this self-awareness that Molly talked a lot about. We provide you in that one-on-one coaching space opportunities to reflect, to set goals, to be held accountable to those goals. We offer, we focus on a growth mindset. So how can we move you from sort of thinking you're stuck in a stagnant place to looking at opportunities for growth and development within yourself. And then we offer feedback in those sessions too. So those are all things that I know Molly talked a little bit about. You also, finding and identifying intrinsic motivation and helping you set goals in that space. We do host workshops like these on different topics, both at request as well as sort of regularly throughout the semester. And then today's was a perfect example of how we partner with University Health and Wellbeing on sort of programs just like this, as well as others across the board. So that's all I have to share. I did want to let you all know that Olivia has graciously agreed to send out the resources that we have shared here today in sort of a end of day email communication with you. So we'll make sure that we get those, Olivia, to you so you can send them out, both the slides that we presented today as well as the resources that were here in the chat. So any other lingering questions or anything else we can answer for y'all?
I just plugged in the chat my email. You'll also probably get an email about my email. But you can reach out to me if you want to work towards your well-being, not related to this necessarily. Also, if you would like to chat with me about my experience in the public health field as well, having a point of contact, especially if you're more in the behavioral health education, I can have a conversation with you. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Molly and Brittany. Like Brittany shared, I will definitely be providing some resources that were shared today in a follow-up email, so please be looking for that. And then I also hope that you all join us for our next session, which is at 2 p.m. We are continuing on with transferable skills and talking about collaborative engagement, also known as teamwork, and what that looks like in the workplace and how you might best navigate it. So you all have a good day, and hopefully we'll see you later. Bye.